Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, we have kind of a historic unboxing. A lot of people have been wanting me to pick these really ridiculously expensive guitars up, and I'm going to do one of them, and then I will leave the other Big Daddy review until this video gets 10,000 likes. We are going to document the Korina guitars that Gibson just released. So if you're not familiar, in the late 50s, we're talking like 1957, Gibson, for that NAMM show, they came out with basically 3 new radical designs. 2 of them have become well known today, the Flying V and the Explorer. The other 2, you know, they were kind of lost to time. We're talking about the Moderne and the Futura. Now the Moderne, you can check out this video if you want to learn all about the first time that was actually produced, at least as far as we know. And that was in the early 80s, and I've documented one of all the main colors there. But then the Futura was basically just the Explorer prototype, so I mean that doesn't necessarily count, but Gibson has done limited edition runs of them here and there. So for this magnificent release by Gibson, they decided for this year they were going to take original scans of Korina Explorers and Vs and do a limited edition run of these for the exact same amount that they made back in 1958. So today, we're going to start this off with the Korina Flying V. This was a collector's release only. It wasn't necessarily meant for a player. They are going to do non-aged, non-Brazilian rosewood fretboarded versions later on that are going to be about half the price, but these guys are $20,000 brand new. And that Explorer is even more and even more limited, but we'll talk about that one another day. So, right out of the box, our case gets a case. Now, I guess it's more apropos to say our case gets a gig bag. That's just funny, but yeah, they reissued the beautiful case. Like, I've never felt a case quite like this before. And apparently they went as far as even like doing the hinges correctly. I guess those are pretty distinctive looking hinges, so I could see why Agnesi saw that right away. But we've got like a locking style one right there, a clasp in the middle, a Gibson badge, and then another clasp over here. Well, let's see if it's worth $20,000. Oh man. If it wasn't for the fretboard and the really shininess of this logo, just looking at the body, that looks close enough to fool most people. Yeah, that is an aging job. There's something about Korina Flying Vs. They are so cool. This one actually has a lot of dancing figuring in it. I mean, just take a look at that in the light. I don't think we've ever seen these quite up close and personal as this. The finish checking looks fairly realistic. I mean, you can tell it's a pattern that they've just repeated and repeated and repeated. But as far as aging jobs go, I'm actually kind of impressed as far as, you know, first impressions here. But it's mainly all about this wood grain for me. I mean, just take a look at that. Oh, yes. And a lot of it is I just spent a whole bunch of money on these things. They better be nice looking, right? So the way that they've constructed these is they're all Korina, which is, you know, kind of a cool thing that Gibson's doing that again, even outside of just this limited edition collector's run. But the Flying Vs have a 2-piece body here, and then what makes these extra special is the fact that they have Brazilian rosewood fretboards. So Brazilian rosewood, unless you have it pre-convention or you're not a major company, you really can't source it and use it because there's a lot of paperwork behind it. So as far as exporting these outside of the USA, unfortunately, you cannot do that. This was a USA release run only because of the fretboard material. But that's what the original ones used, Brazilian rosewood. That's why you buy Gibsons that were made before, you know, roughly 1965, is because people like the Brazilian rosewood. Now, the pickup cover aging, not my favorite, but they got this one actually pretty darn close. Like, it almost has a brass cover to it instead of, like, gold. I like the way they've done that. Then the V string-through design, that's right. These old-style Flying Vs are, in fact, a ferrule string-through design. So 1958, as I was telling you, the first year, official year for these guys. They made 81 that year. But between 58 and 59, there was roughly 100 of them made. So if you want an original 50s Flying V, I mean, A, you have to have a whole boatload of money. I mean, we're talking anywhere between like $200,000 for like a really beat up repaired one up to like $400,000 to $500,000. I mean, they do sell for more than a burst because they're just more rare. I mean, how many bursts were made? Roughly 1,500 or so. So that number in comparison to 100 makes it a lot more rare. And they're super desirable because, the Flying V, despite, being super futuristic and not popular at first, it caught on later on. However, you can find a few 60s leftover Vs until about 1963. I mean, there's only a handful of those out there. And personally for me, I don't want a 60s Korina Flying V. If I'm going to spend the big money, I would rather have one of the original 50s because there's so many fakes out there on the market too. You got to be careful of that. And the fact that they're just kind of leftover parts guitar, I don't know if I would feel comfortable verifying one of those. And then sometimes you can also find them in 1966. However, in 1967, that is the official return of the Flying V. But when they brought it back, the one that we see right here is nothing like the 67 style Flying V. That's when they get the Gibson on the truss rod cover. They lose their nice big gaudy Gibson logo that I love oh so much. The general shape of the body changes. You don't get like all this. I mean, this is a very sizable, I don't know what you would call it, like a shoulder, I guess you could say. They don't have the rubber strip on the edge. I mean, this is supposed to make it so it's easier to play like this, even though most people just straddle their Vs. I mean, that's the best way to do it. But they started to make them out of mahogany. They were no longer string through. If you want a kind of a closer representation of that, you could look at my Hendrix video that I did of his signature Flying V, which is more of a Flying V custom, but it's kind of close to that. And ever since then, the Flying V has been in production in one way or the other. I really like the 70s Flying Vs. But as far as, a true 58 style Flying V, there's been some limited edition runs here and there, but this is like the cream of the crop. This is the ones that people will whisper about in the future and write lore and stories of. So I thought it was very important to document one of these things. So not only do you get the guitar with this, they give you not one, but two pick guards, which I did not know about until these things came out. And oh, yes, I love it. Whoever did this, they actually aged this pick guard. I think this should have just been the stock one. So it's got a bit of like a yellow tint to it. Now, obviously, that's probably just a little bit of clear coat aged lacquer that they did there. But, oh yeah. It's hard for me to decide because I like the black one because it kind of reminds me of like Joe Bonamasso's Amos. But traditionally, you see the white and it matches with the poker chip. I'm curious, do we get a spare poker chip in here? Doesn't look like it, which I'm hoping that's in there somewhere because it seems strange they'll give you a spare pick guard, but not a spare poker chip for this. But let's go ahead and see our other case candy here because they gave us a whole bunch. So regular case tag, looks like vintage tone circuit. It's basically just talking about our capacitors. You get your regular style pre-pack checklist. I actually got an exceptionally nice serial number. This one is number 9. There it is. There's our poker chip. I knew they wouldn't let us down. So if you wanted to swap it over to the black version, you can. But they're even giving us, sweet reproduction guitar picks. I love those vintage guitar picks. But the problem is they're so thin they break. Now this is actually pretty thick. I think you could actually use these if you wanted to. But heaven forbid you use any case candy of a collector's model and you lose it. Especially this thing. Oh yeah, that's nice. A vintage looking Gibson pennant. They could probably sell these things. Then we get a cool old-timey cable. I doubt anybody will ever use them, but they are nice case candy. And then you get a vintage style strap that appears to be real leather. Well, it smells like the Town and Country store, so it might be. And of course, they also give you an amber switch tip in here if you want to swap that over. Then of course, you can't forget the actual COA. This is a really big leather-bound booklet. I would actually say it's a really dark brown color, more so than black like normal. Collector's Edition Korina Flying V 81009. So the way that they did these, every single one starts 81, and then the Flying Vs went up to serial number 81. After that, that starts the Explorers. Personally, I think they should have did the Explorers numbers first because, it would have been more fun, but whatever. But I do want to comment about the way the interior feels. It's nice and plush, especially this. I mean, this is a little bit scratchier, but it's not like scratchy. That's actually really, really nice. So I think that was a pretty good history lesson on the 50s Flying Vs. They are very interesting guitars. I remember one last story here. Like when I was first getting into guitars, I went to a guitar center once and I picked one of these like reissues up and I fell in love with this thing. I mean, it's an incredibly lightweight guitar despite being kind of gigantic to say the least. So I am looking forward to documenting this one today. So let's go ahead, throw it on the workbench, take an individual look at its parts and specs, and then get to that playing demo. And heck, nobody else is gonna do it, so I might as well switch this over to the black pickguard too. All right, inside of a 58 style Flying V, Korina body, all this stuff. This is the first time I've torn one of these things apart, and you know, just little things like this is kind of cool, and I wasn't expecting. I thought there was going to be like a huge route leading up into here. I didn't think there'd just be little channels for the wires to go through, and this is even pretty interesting. So, underneath the hood, we have Gibson custom buckers in here. They've kind of aged the patent applied for decal stickers here to make them look like a vintage PAF. It doesn't look like they went as far as like replicating the tooling marks on the edge. Well, maybe they did, or at least tried to do something similar to that. But these are reading 7.86 in the bridge, and the neck is actually hotter at 8.05, and then the in-between position for both of them, about 3.98. But now let's check out our cavity routes. So the neck actually extends all the way into this area. So normally a long neck tenon for Les Pauls like ends right here. But this one goes all the way underneath where the pickguard actually is. So you can see the maple stripe of wood right there that they use to cap off the truss rod channel. But the rest of that is limbo wood, better known as Korina. But our bridge pickup cavity is actually very shallow. That's not as deep as a Les Paul's one. And you can see the ground wire coming out from right there that likely goes to that ABR1 bridge stud and then to the rest of the electronics there. But as far as markings, I don't actually see anything in here, which is kind of unusual. But likely correct for one of these if it was a 50s original. So our ABR1 bridge is a traditional one drilled directly into the body for $20,000. I sure as heck hope it would be. And we have a non-wired ABR1 bridge. They slightly aged it, just rubbed some of the gold off in certain locations, and the back just reads Gibson ABR1. Now you might notice, why is my thumb wheel missing? It's simply because you have to remove that to remove the pickguard. I always wondered where they got that from for the 67 style Flying V. That's one thing I hate about those. To remove anything and work on the pickups, you have to mess with your whole setup. This one, I guess you only have to mess with the treble side setup. But I guess I could take some time to elaborate a little bit more on the differences between the 58 and 67 style Flying Vs. So stock from the factory, these 58s, they actually get pickup rings, and the pickups are separate from the pickguard, whereas the 67s, the pickups are actually within that pickguard. And our control layout is completely different. These ones, they're all in a line, the other ones are kind of more in a triangle. And then after that, we kind of have like the 83 style alder bodied ones. Those are known for being used in some thrash metal bands like Metallica. But that pretty much covers the bulk majority of the V styles. But you've got 2 volumes and a master tone, 3-way toggle switch like normal. But that's what that hole in the pickguard is for. It's for your ABR1 bridge stud to go through. And you'll notice they even took the time to age the knobs. They've got a nice yellowed hue to them as well. And even the white pickguard, I saw it on the black one, but not on the white one at first, because I thought that was just reflecting the finish. They kind of have like a yellow lacquer over top of that to make it look older. But that's just on the edges. The actual pickguard itself is pretty clean. I'm surprised they didn't scratch that up, stock from the factory to make it look like it was played a bit more. But as far as the wiring, that's just pretty basic stuff, Gibson pots. The only thing really cool is they reissued the phone book style capacitor right there. But now for the output jack. I thought that route was going to be a lot bigger than that. That is just enough room to fit that on there. And then it just has this little poker chip that kind of help keep it secure into place. So before I swap the pickguard over here, let's go ahead and just take a look at some of this aging. Now, I used to think Gibson was still doing the razor blade technique. I don't think they are anymore. I think they do a lot of this by hand, like the nicks and dings. But as far as the actual finish checking, I think they're actually putting these in freezers. They might be. What makes me think that is normally you wouldn't get finish checking in a pickup cavity, but yet this one very clearly has it. So that means they're likely freezing these bodies and then just making them crack naturally. That'd be my best guess. I really don't know. I wish I could sit down with the Murphy age division and, just see exactly how they do these. The only thing that would have made this run even better is if Murphy himself would have aged each and every single one of these. This is just Gibson's in-house custom shop aging, essentially, branded Murphy Labs. But so far, I would say this is the most realistically aged guitar that I've seen come out of Gibson. The checking's not too deep. It feels good. It doesn't, detract from the way that the guitar plays. The Hendrix SG, I was not a big fan of that one. But this one, it feels right. It looks right. To me, anyways. But here you can see our tailpiece. I'm assuming this is like screwed to the top with 3 screws right there, and then they cap it off somehow. I'm really not sure on that, but they did a pretty good job aging that. It looks like maybe a little bit of blood on there as well. String through Flying V 2-piece Korina body. All right, let's go ahead and do the laborious task of switching this over to a black one. Before and after. That only took about 5 minutes, not as bad as I thought. Some knobs sit really close to the pick guards, but these are pretty high up and they've got the pointers, so that was easy enough just to take off by hand. So any average collector Joe would be able to do this modification or swap it back. What's great about this is Gibson included them, so nobody can go, "Oh, you changed something on the guitar." You're fine. You're fine. 100% fine. In fact, I bet there's somebody at the custom shop who made this guitar that's like, I am so happy somebody at least converted theirs over. Because they had to make, 81 of those things just to probably sit in a case. But one kind of cool feature that I wanted to point out here was that the back of the black one is actually white, whereas the back of the white one is black, and that's because of the multi-layers. They just reverse the colors because they're 3-ply pick guards. And I also wanted to point out, this is actually an L-style switch, so not the tall one that the Gibson Les Paul uses. So kind of more like an SG. Didn't know that before today. But anyways, on from our 2-piece Korina body, we have a straight-up Korina neck that is 1 piece, and of course, the Brazilian rosewood fretboard. Now, does this make this guitar sound absolutely way more fantastic? No. I mean, you got a little bit more of a porous wood here. It doesn't have a lot of like that characteristic redness in the Brazilian rosewood that a lot of these are known for, but it's just part of being historically accurate using the Brazilian stuff. It's part of Gibson lore. Kind of the same reason why people go gaga over Korina Gibsons. Korina is not a rare or super expensive wood by any means. There's some companies like Reverend makes every single guitar of theirs out of Korina, but it is sacred within the history books of Gibson, so that's why it just doesn't get used much, and there's always a huge premium when it does show up. So the fact that we got Brazilian rosewood on here is just, mind-boggling. And that's the reason why these things are so expensive. But we've got 22 medium jumbo frets on here. Now it's kind of hard to see, but they did roll the fretboard edges to kind of make it look like it has been, worn in a little bit, so it's not a sharp edge. And then you can see your side marker inlays are all yellow because of the yellow gloss over the edge. Let's go ahead and grab our neck dimensions. We've got a nylon nut that measures a little over 1.7 inches. Then by the 12th, 2.07. We've got a pretty chunky neck on this one, measuring 0.9 at the first fret and 0.99 by the 12th. But it feels really rounded up here, but as you go up, it almost feels like it gets skinnier. It's like not quite as rounded. It flattens out just a hair. I honestly kind of prefer this area on this neck, but that's just the way that I felt. Seeing it like this kind of helps me understand what I was even talking about. So here it is at your first fret, here it is at the 12th fret. I think the reason why it feels like it gets skinnier is simply because it gets extremely wide at the 12th fret. So the roundedness is just due to this area being a little bit skinnier feeling, more so than even other guitars. Now as far as our headstock here, regular truss rod style on here, everything is looking good there. And you get all the finish checking goodness as you saw on the rest of this guitar. And the truss rod cover is one of those vintage style ones with the wide white beveled edge. They're super cool. And I always thought this Gibson badge was gold, but it's just silver. And the way that these things work is they have 2 posts in them, and that just connects to everything else. And then it just gets inset onto the headstock. Those are pretty easy to break if you get a big ding on them, so do be careful if you plan to gig this. That's what's great about this collector's edition one is you can gig it and play it all you want, as long as you don't put a giant gouge that looks way out of place compared to the rest of the aging. You're fine. Nobody is ever going to know the difference between factory aging and non. So if you've never been really keen on an aged guitar and you're kind of thinking about just the unlimited production one, just remember, these have serious collector's value. They were $20,000 brand new, but looking at the resale market today, so far I've seen 2 of them come up for $25,000. One of them sold. The other one's still there. So if you wanted one of these, you had about a week before they sold out at stores. So if you want one of these and you happen to have missed out at retail, I do seriously believe they're all gone, unless some of them haven't shipped out to dealers yet. That would be your only hope for getting a brand new one. But the last thing I want to look at on the front is, let's just take a quick look at these pickup covers again. I love the way that it's like a dull gold, because sometimes you have too shiny of gold, it doesn't look right. They've got the string wear on top of them. I think they could use like a dent or two. But they did a pretty good job on these. I think it looks more realistic than the Hendrix ones. But then again, they're trying to replicate a certain style on this, whereas the other ones, they were trying to replicate his. And that's the big thing about this run, in case it wasn't clear. These were made using real scans of vintage originals, and every single one is a little bit different. So it's like a combination of all those specs. And I do want to take back there's no scratches. There's just no deep scratches. This black one kind of shows you. They did try to scuff it up just a hair. Moving on to the backside here, not too much to talk about since mostly everything is mounted to the pickguard. You don't need any back cavity routes except for the strings going through here. So we'll just take a second to appreciate the beautiful aged nature of this guitar. They did a pretty darn good job right here. I like all these little nicks and dings. They're not too deep, but they're there just enough that it looks, pretty realistic. I mean, that's right where it would rest against like somebody's belt buckle area. So of course it'd get all dinged up right there. And of course they've got all the finish checking along the sides. I mean, it really stands out. And there's just a few areas that they cut through down to the bare wood and kind of dirtied it up. Here's a nice angle. I mean, every different lighting angle, you see something different that they did. I mean, just take a look at some of this, especially down here. You actually get an area that's worn through just a little bit more. I'm guessing that is because of your strap, maybe? Depends on how you string it up, I guess. Or I guess it could also just be arm wear. And to be honest, the aging of the screws is pretty minimal. Like, there's one right there that has some aging, but they didn't do too much, unlike the Eddie Van Halen Frankenstrat replica that we reviewed from the custom shop of Fender. But as far as aging jobs go, this one looks all right to me. I really like the eye right here. That's pretty cool. But despite not looking like there's any ferrules in there, there are. You just gotta look really close. You got those brass ferrules right there. And you've got the Gibson style strings on here stock. But you can't take a look at a 58 style Flying V without looking at this thing. So if you've never seen this before, this is just like a hard rubber like strip. So like, think a welcome mat to your house that you rub your shoes on, like a really rigid, tough foam one of those. That's pretty much what they do. They just route some of the guitar out right here, and then I think they glue it into place maybe. So sometimes you find the vintage Vs with that missing, but that was just to give it a little bit of extra grip if you wanted to hold it like a regular guitar. And something else you might not have known about this style of Flying V is the body actually extends over top of the neck right there. So it's like a super secure fit because you got just a little bit more to the body right here. Some SGs are also made this way, and you know, unless you ever see it, you don't necessarily realize it, because who else is taking a look at neck joins on vintage Vs? But hey, the more you know. And our strap buttons, that's another big difference between a 67 and this one. It's on the shoulder right here. I mean, you couldn't do that on a 67 style Flying V because they essentially just got rid of the shoulders and made it more streamlined and not as wide feeling. But your other one is down here. It's not the best placement, I'll be honest. It is kind of neck divey depending on how you hold this thing. I'll demonstrate that in the playing demo though. But we'll just run up and down the neck here. None of these dings that you're seeing, that you don't really feel them while you play it. But that is some nice looking finish checking on top of that Korina wood grain. And we've got some single ring, single line Kluson style tuners here. And I like that they even took the time to put a little bit of dirt and grime in between the seam right here. They did that for every single one. And they kind of aged the gold hardware. And here is our serial number for this one, 81009. Once again, that goes all the way up to 81 for the Flying V, so that's not too bad of a serial number. Any of the first 10 looks kind of cool. But that is, you know, pretty much everything I can tell you about this very rare Flying V. At the end of the day, which pickguard style do I like better? I mean, this has a certain vibe to it, but I think I prefer the white, and I think that's why they shipped most of them like that. So, if you are a true collector and you want to be able to display all this stuff, you clearly need two of these. One that's in white, one that's in black. I'm really surprised that they didn't like split the run up like that and ship them out in different variants. I think that could have been fun too, but that would have made things even more complicated. So lastly, our weight. This one is about 7 pounds, 10 ounces. Not too bad, not the lightest one I've ever heard of either though. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Okay, let's go ahead and walk through the tones. We'll start with clean and then we'll go over to dirty. But first impressions, holding it like this, yeah, it's a little bit neck heavy. Naturally, I think a placement of the strap button back here would help with that, but you know, with the rubber gripper over here, you're kind of meant to sit with this. But let's go ahead and start with our neck pickup here. Alright, so as far as the clean tones go, I mean, it's nice. It didn't necessarily overly impress me anywhere. I do like the middle position though. Nice and like bell-like qualities. The neck is really deep. I could see a blues guy picking this thing up, you know, kind of Albert King-esque vibes. I mean, he used one of these. But I can tell that bridge really, really wants to sing, so I think we need to switch over to a little bit of distortion to give this thing a real go. So what are my final thoughts on the Gibson Collector Series Flying V? Is it the best guitar I've ever played? No, I mean, a lot of the premium that you are paying for this one simply comes down to the Brazilian rosewood fretboard, the fact that it is an ultra limited edition, Murphy aged, replicated from the originals. I mean, if you're buying one of these, it's likely because you're a collector or a speculator in the market, and there's nothing wrong with having collector guitars. Honestly, it's a bit of a dud in my opinion. This was not the same as that Guitar Center one that I had played. This one, sometimes you can get some that resonate really well. This one felt a little bit dead, but you know, there's going to be different examples for each. So would I have personally taken this one home after playing it? Probably not. But that's just kind of the nature of the game here. It's a collectible guitar. I was lucky to even get one of these, so I was glad that I could document this. For me, it's all about that VOS. I need to get that worn off. Even the strings feel a little bit old, like they're not actually aged. I can tell it's just the VOS compound, and I get that a lot on brand new guitars. So I'd probably suggest conditioning your fretboard, you know, changing out your strings to make it a much better playing instrument, then just really sit down and hammer into it. They can be a lot of fun. So if you're looking to add one of these to your collection, good luck. Now that they're out of stock, seemingly, I don't even want to know what the resale value will be like on these things. But if you can't find one, what are your next best bets? I would honestly suggest go check out one of the 80s Korina Flying Vs. I think they started those around 1981, 82. They look very similar. They're vintage guitars in their own right at this point in time. And they were kind of a limited edition series. They're kind of cool. They don't have exactly the right specs, but they're pretty close enough. Now, I'm sure the release of these might make those start to sell for more, but those are a much cheaper alternative. I would assume 8,000 could get you the pick of the litter, unless, I mean, you're looking at a prototype. That'd be about 15. But even then, that's way cheaper than this. You might check out one of the anniversary ones from 2008 as well, because those will be a little bit cheaper than this. And they're still collectible in their own right, just probably not as sought after as these in the future, but we'll see how that goes. And of course, there's also going to be the new unlimited production of these without the Brazilian rosewood fretboard and aging. So if you hate the aging job, you can also get a beautiful Korina Explorer. All right, troglodytes, thank you for tuning in today to check out a 58 style Flying V. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because remember, we need 10,000, and then I will post the Explorer review. I'll start working on it at that point. If you're curious, that Slash video, the last one, it did make its goal, as did the Haruhata Stratocaster, so I am in the process of making those videos happen. The Slash is probably gonna take me a couple of months to find all those guitars, though. All right, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.